My name is Jory Hadsel, and I'm the Distance Education Coordinator for Sacramento City College. And as we get started, I just want to point out a couple of things for our audience, particularly the online audience. And that is, first, there's some documentation that we'll make available from this workshop, and you can access that following the workshop at this URL, saccityonline.org/de/faculty resources. It's where we're trying to post all of our content from these workshops. And then this presentation is also being recorded, so you can access it. We'll have the link up later today at the URL where we post our COVE videos. So thanks so much for being a part of this workshop today. I will stop periodically and bring back the text box so you can ask questions for the online audience. And for those of you in the room, you can ask questions as well. So today we're really talking about how to create a basic gradebook. And as you may know, there are lots of variations on how to do that. The Gradebook tool is one that you can go very deep with if that's what you want to do. And it's also one that you can just use some basic commands and do some grade postings without getting too deep into D2L. So here's a listing of the learning outcomes for today's workshop. And at the end of this workshop, you should be able to understand the difference between grade categories and grade items. We'll talk about that. You should also be able to use the Manage Grades and Enter Grades interfaces effectively. And you should be able to configure the grade settings, create a basic points-based gradebook in D2L with multiple categories in it. You'll know what the final calculated grade is and how to release that to your students. And then you also should be able to link grade items to existing Dropbox items, quizzes, and discussions. Okay, so that's a list of our learning outcomes for today, and we're going to try to do this in the next 40 minutes or so. So let's go. So the first thing I want to point out before we actually jump into D2L, and we'll do that in a minute, is there's some verbiage or some jargon that you need to be aware of with D2L, and you're going to see it come up in a couple of screens. One of those has to do with what you see when you're in D2L. It can be the managing view, which is really referring to what you see as the instructor. So when you're working in the gradebook, the managing view is your view of things, whereas the submission view would be the view that your students see. And of course, when they see the gradebook, they go to the same link. They only see their own grades. They don't see everyone's grades and all the categories and everything and the options that you have. There are also some different grade calculation options, and we'll come back to those in just a couple minutes, but you need to be aware of those as well. So what I want to do here actually is go over to D2L, and I have a sample class that I've set up here, and we're going to basically construct a very basic gradebook. So first, we'll go to the grades link. And when you first go to the grades link in a D2L class, this should be what you see. There's a setup wizard that you can run that asks you some questions and helps you configure the default parameters for your gradebook. And then that only runs once. So you'll see that the first time you come in to set up a gradebook. Beyond that, you'll have to go to these different areas on their own, which is really not a problem. But we're going to go ahead and run this grade setup wizard just so we can have the experience of doing that, and we'll set up our gradebook. So before we begin, I just want to mention that this particular course, we're going to keep it simple. So we'll have a weekly discussion assignment, a weekly Dropbox assignment, and a weekly quiz. Nothing else. We're not going to deal with extra credit and all that stuff because, again, this is a basic gradebook. But just so you know, that's the format of the class, and I was building this with an 8-week format in mind. So let's go ahead and start the wizard. It gives you a little welcome and talks about some settings. We're going to click this Start button here. And when we do that, we can see we're on step 1 of 6 here, and it asks us to choose a grading system. So what I recommend, unless you are an expert user in the D2L gradebook or at least intermediate or advanced level, is to use a point system. And I know that when we all create our gradebooks as faculty, we like to get really creative, and we typically do weighting of our grades. Sometimes that weighting is done with points, and sometimes we do it with weighted categories. I'm not going to cover weighted categories today because we just don't have the time. We're going to cover the points scheme, which is the actually most common method used by faculty anyway. So we'll select points here and click next. And so lo and behold, step 2, we're already to this grade calculation piece. And that's what I was hinting at a minute ago, where we have the choice about how we want to treat ungraded items. So if we have items that exist in our gradebook, do we want those to be treated like they're not graded or treated as a 0? And I have a couple little demonstrations for you so you can see what those look like. The drop ungraded items, I like to call that a running score. And the ungraded items is 0, I like to call that a cumulative score. And here's what that looks like. Let's see. So if you were to drop ungraded items, here's an example from a course, which we'll be rebuilding here in a minute. A student who has completed, it's the end of week 1, they've completed the week 1 quiz, and they got a 10 out of 10 on the quiz. So at this point, effectively they have 100% score of all the points available in the class. You can see up here where it says final calculated grade that they have 10 out of 10 points possible overall in the class. Now next week, after the Chapter 2 quiz, they could have 20 out of 20 or 18 out of 20 or whatever score, but the 20 would be the points possible. This is what happens when you drop the ungraded items. The alternative choice is actually to treat them as 0. And here with this same example, same scores, you can see from the student point of view, they got 10 out of 10 points on the week 1 quiz, 100%. But their grade, what's showing up as their grade in the course is a 14.29%. And it's showing as 10 out of 70. Now you can imagine if you use a couple hundred points or 1,000 points as your points possible in the course, that they would seem like they had a very minuscule grade. So it's just a personal preference for you as instructor, which method you want to use. I recommend using the dropping ungraded items because it really does allow students to have a better view of where they stand in the class at the current time. Okay, so let's head back to D2L for one more minute. So we're going, for the purposes of this, we're going to say let's drop the ungraded items. And then you also have this choice to automatically keep the final grade updated. I always leave that checked. I recommend you do the same thing, and that way when your students look at their grades, their final grade's always updated. Just click Next to move through this wizard. It asks us what kind of a grading scheme we want to use, and a percentage scheme is what is in there by default. Again, showing you that example we had a moment ago. This is a percentage scheme, so when it shows the grade over here on the side, it's using a percentage, and the final calculated grade is also a percentage up in here. It is possible to set up other schemes, but that's, again, beyond the scope of what we're going to cover today. We'll click Next to accept that default. You have some choices that are fun, like how many decimal places you want to display for your students, and depending on how technical your students are going to be, you may want to display 2, you may want to display none, or if you're teaching math class, you may want to display 3 or 4 decimal points so that your students can see how you rounded their grade. Again, that's just your choice. And you'll notice here that it says for the managing view. So actually, these are the decimal points that you're going to see. So, maybe you want to see 3, right? So you can be a little generous if somebody has a, 0.8949 grade and you want to round it up to a 90 or something like that. I'm going to change that back to 2 though. And then we'll go Next again. And now you see Submission View display options. And you remember that the Submission View is what your students see. So this is, again, going to impact that view. You have the option to show the points grade the symbol and color. So for example, back on our example here, you'll notice that the color that's associated with 100% or 90 or above grade is blue, and then the pink is associated with the 0. Those are some of the defaults that are in there. And so basically it's just kind of a color coding version of where you are with your grade. There's a blue and a green and a yellow and some other colors in there. You can choose whether you want that to be on or off for the students. Again, this would be how many decimal places you want them to see as opposed to yourself when you're working in your gradebook. And then if you have text items such as the name of an assignment, how long you want that to be. Because of course, if you have really long names for your grade items, then your gradebook's going to be a mile wide and can be a little bit unwieldy. So you can limit those items there. And then this calculation piece actually shows you whether users can see how their final grade was calculated. You would only really want to use this if you had assignments that were not counted in the final grade. So maybe you have optional assignments or something like that. I recommend for most people just leaving that unchecked. This is step 5 of 6. We'll click next, and it brings us to a summary of all the choices we made. I'll click finish, and now our gradebook is actually configured. So this particular screen, it's kind of funny, this one where it says grade options and you can do these different things. This only comes up right after you run the wizard, which typically you only run once. So what I like to tell people to do is once you've run the wizard and you see this screen, actually come up here to the Manage Grades link up here on the left. And this is where you really get a better view of what your gradebook is going to look like. So now we're at the point where this is our gradebook, and we have nothing in it, just a final grade, which is blank, of course. So let's talk just a little bit about how the information in here is organized. I'll jump back to the presentation for a minute on that. So categories and items, think of them as a category is just a grouping, right? Like a folder, and an item is actually a grade item. It's like a column in your grade book where you're going to be able to enter grades for each individual student. So for example, what you see on the screen here, quizzes is the category. So everything is grouped under quizzes. And then the grade items are, week 1 quiz, week 2 quiz, week 3 quiz. That's the way that the gradebook is organized. So when we talk about categories and items, it's very similar if you've worked in the content area of D2L to the idea of modules and topics. These also show up in the Enter Grade screen. So what we were looking at here a second ago is actually the Manage Grade screen, which is where we're going to build all of the categories and items. The Enter Grade screen is actually where you'll be able to see student by student their individual scores on each item that's in your gradebook. So I just wanted you to be aware of what it looks like in both places. So what we'll do is we'll come back to D2L, and let's go ahead and make some categories and some items. So it's pretty easy to do. Again, we're on Manage Grades. Come up here to the top and select New Category. So in this class, we're going to have 3 categories. We're going to have quizzes, assignments, and discussions. So this is the create a new category screen. We'll type in a name and we'll say quizzes. I don't need to worry about a short name. I'll explain that in a minute. You have some options about grading. For example, if it can exceed the point value, let's say you set each discussion to be worth 5 points, and you want to be able to give somebody a 6 out of 5 because they did an outstanding job. That's what this box would do. And again, I talked a moment ago about excluding some items from the final grade calculation. That's this second box here, which would say, you know what, I want to score these, but I don't want these to count in that final calculation. There's also a distribution option here, which is a little more advanced, and I'm not going to cover that today. So we'll just go with the defaults, quizzes. I'm going to make 3 categories. So instead of clicking Save, I'm going to click Save and New, which gives me the chance to actually create another category while I'm at it. I made quizzes, and you see the little indication down here that was created successfully. Let's make assignments, another category, save and new, and we'll make a third category called discussions. This time I'll just click save because I'm not going to have a fourth category. Okay, now if I come back to the grades list, which also, by the way, takes me to the same place as if I go to manage grades. So either one of those links will take me to the same place. Now you can see I have 3 categories and I have a final calculated grade. Great. Well, what we would want to do at this point is add some items to each of those categories. And I mentioned before that this particular class is an 8-week format. So we're going to give a quiz every week, an assignment every week, and a discussion every week, just to keep things nice and simple for demonstration purposes. Let's go ahead and add in some quizzes. So again, we've got our categories. We'll come up here now and we'll make a new item. When I select a new item, I have the choice of several different types of items. By far, the most standard type of item to use is a numeric item, where you're going to actually enter a score for users. You do have some options such as pass-fail and text. For example, if you wanted to put a note in there that said something like orientation completed or something like that. Most people use the numeric, and that's what we're going to stick with for today. So we'll select numeric, and then we'll type in week 1 quiz. Now you may have noticed this next field down here is called short name. Short name is really useful because when you're using your gradebook, remember how I talked about it being a mile wide before if you have really long names for your assignments? Using short names allows you in your when you're in the spreadsheet view of your gradebook to have very narrow columns. So I might call this Q1, for example, as a short name. That's something I'm going to see. The students aren't going to see it. And then I also have the choice of putting it in a category here. So I'll select quizzes, which we just made that category a minute ago. And then there's a point value. So for the sake of this particular category, I'm going to stick with the 10 points available. It's not a bonus. I don't want to exclude it from the final grade. So I basically accept all the defaults, put the point value in, and click Save. Or in this case, I'm going to enter multiple quizzes. I'll click Save and New. And now it's asking me for my next one. Choose numeric again. Enter week 2 quiz. Q2, 10 points. Make another one. Week 3 quiz. If you forget to categorize these, we can go back and do that. I think I forgot to categorize the second one, so I'll show you how to do that in bulk, which is kind of nice. Hang in there, the payoff's coming here in just a moment. So we've got week 5. What's nice is the students will see week 6 quiz, so they get the lengthier name. I'll see Q6, and I will know what that means since I'm the instructor. I realize I have a capital U in there. Take that out. And last one is going to be week 8. This one's going to be a final exam. Okay, click Save. And now if we pop back up here to, again, the grades list, which I can also get to from Manage Grades, it's the same link. Now you'll see our gradebook is starting to take shape a little bit. So we have several quizzes that are grouped under quizzes, but you'll notice down at the bottom, week 2, 4, and 7, something happened. We went awry somewhere, and I'll make that a little bit bigger for you. Hopefully that helps. So these ones I forgot to categorize. I just spaced it out when I was putting these in. Never fear, there's an easy way to fix that. what I can do is check the little boxes here to select those quizzes. And again, these are just the grade items. These aren't the quizzes themselves. And then this nice little double pencil icon. Anytime you see the double pencil, it's two pencils together, it allows you to edit multiple items at once. So I'm going to click on that here. And now I can have several options. I can rename these grade items. I can change the point value. I can make a bonus or not. But I also have the ability to recategorize them. So I'm going to toss these in the quizzes category real quick. Click Save. And now my quizzes are all here under Quizzes. And you'll notice the categories have a gray background and the grade items are white background here. So that helps you distinguish those as well. They're a little bit out of order. So I'm going to come up here and click Reorder. And then it's just a matter of saying, okay, week 1, let's see, quiz 2 needs to be number 2. 3 is 3. Quiz 4 needs to be 4th. 5, 6. This should be 7. And the final exam is 8. Click Save. And now everything's nice and sorted for me here. So again, we've created quiz items. They're not associated with anything, but it's a simple, if I want to enter grades manually, I can just come over here to like week 1 quiz. And anywhere you see this little ruler with a check mark, that's a grading icon. So I can click on this little icon to grade the week 1 quiz. And what it'll do is it'll bring up a list of all the students in the class. And I could come in here and I could manually enter my grades. I can also enter feedback for those students. If I want to click on the little comment bubble here, put it in the top box, I can say, great job on this quiz. You know that that function is there for you as well. And the little icon changes. I don't know if you could see that very well. There's a little orange burst behind it to indicate that, that I've left feedback for that student. I'll click Save. It wants to make sure I want to save those changes. Click Yes. And I've just entered grades for quiz 1. So if you want to manually enter grades, that's one way to do it. Notice as well that the color schemes I talked about, green, blue, pink, whatnot, are also showing up here. Now, if I go back to Manage Grades, again, I don't really have an indication on this screen that I've entered those grades. However, if I go to the Enter Grade screen, this is where you see your actual grade book. And you'll see a list of all the students in the class. Of course, we only have a handful here because this is a demonstration. You can see the category is quizzes. So we created that category. And each item, it's showing the short title here. Right? Now, had I not used a short title, this column would be twice as long because it would say week 1 quiz, week 2 quiz, week 3 quiz, week 4 quiz. So I'm able to see all the quizzes in a smaller space, which is kind of handy. And I can also collapse the categories using this little button here. So if I want to shrink that down, I can see a subtotal for all the quizzes. I would later have a subtotal for all the assignments and for the discussions as well. From this screen, I also have the grading icon, you'll notice. So if you prefer to work out of this screen, I can grade from here by clicking on the grading icon for quiz 1, for example. This brings up the same screen where I can enter those grades, just like we did before. Okay, let's go back to Manage Grades for a minute. And let's enter some assignments as well. And I want to show you how to link Dropbox assignments or discussions or quizzes to items in the gradebook so that if you're teaching a class that's taking advantage of the online technology, you don't have to necessarily enter everything manually. So for example, in this class, I have a Dropbox. I'll show you what that looks like here. It allows students to upload files for their homework each week. First 7 weeks, and week 8, there's a final. So what I can do actually is go back, I want to go back to grades, and this is a good recommendation for you when you're actually setting up your own course is if you've worked out on paper how you want to set up your gradebook and what all of the point values are going to be, create your gradebook first. Then go in and create the assignments, the drop boxes, the discussions, and the quizzes. And I'll show you why in just a moment. So because I know I have an assignments category here, I'm going to click New Item, make it new, start making some assignment items. So we'll call this Assignment 1. Let's see, no, actually homework I think was what I was going with. Homework 1. We'll put this in the assignments category, and we'll make these worth 5 points. And you'll notice I'm not putting in a short title here. Homework 2. Again, regroup this. Put in 5. Now, if I really wanted to fly through this, what I could do, once the page refreshes here, I'm waiting for it, is I could just go in and put the names and the points, because that's all that's really required. And then we can go back and use that multi-edit tool to actually sort of fix everything at once. It appears D2L has stalled out on me here for a second, so I'm just waiting for the page to refresh. There we go. Okay. Let's try it. Homework 3. Homework 4. Homework 5. You get the picture by now, right? Homework 6. And homework 7 was going to be our last one. Click Save. We'll go back to our grades list. And now we have all these homeworks. You know, remember, homework 1 and 2 I categorized, and I made them 5 points, and I put them in assignments. 3 through 7, I was just in a hurry, so all I did was type in the titles. What's nice is I can select these. Again, come back to this multi-pencil, multi-edit icon here. And now I have the ability to say, you know what, I want this to be 5 points, this to be 5 points, this to be 5 points. It's just a little faster to enter. It's fewer clicks. And I want all these to go under assignments. Click Save. It gives you a little warning, and because I haven't entered any grades yet, I can ignore this. If you had already graded these and you went to change the maximum points here, you would probably not want to make these changes. But since we're setting everything up, we'll click Save. And voila, now I have 8 weekly quizzes and I have 7 weekly homework assignments. And again, if we go back to our actual grade book by clicking on Enter Grades, you'll see now that my gradebook has just gotten a lot wider. So I have quizzes, and you'll notice one nice feature about D2L is it repeats the student names every like 5 columns by default. So you don't have to continually scroll back to the beginning to see whose grade you're looking at. That's why you're seeing the grades in here. So the quizzes end up here, and then the assignments begin here. And as I showed you before, you can collapse any of these categories while you're looking at it. So for example, all my quizzes now are condensed in this column, and now I'm only looking at assignments the rest of the way here. One thing I'd point out is because I didn't enter a short title, these are, you know, somewhat wider columns. So it may be worth going back to Manage Grades again, selecting these, using the multi-edit pencil, shortening these. And again, this is sort of shorthand that we do for our grade books. Students are not going to see the short title on this. They'll only see the longer one. Click Save. And we'll go back to the Enter Grade screen. Notice how much more condensed that is now that we use the short titles. Homework 1, Homework 2, Homework 3, Homework 4. Everything is fitting on one screen with the quizzes collapsed here. And even if I expand that, we have several quizzes, and then we get into the assignments on this side. By the way, your final calculated grade is defined as the current total score in the class. D2L uses the term final calculated grade. It's a little narrow for how I like to think of it, but that's just a running total, or your student's total in the class so far. In the gradebook area, by default, it shows as the last column in your gradebook. Something I like to do is, if you come in this screen here, this is the Enter Grade screen, and if you come up here to Display Options, click on that. You can turn different items on and off, for one thing. So if week 1 is over and you don't want to see those items in your gradebook, you can do that. The other thing is in the grade settings, there's actually an option to include that final grade right up front. So it shows at the end of your gradebook and right next to the first name in the gradebook. So we'll do that in a minute. Actually, let's do that now. We'll click on Grade Settings. Now these are the things that you were asked during that wizard, but you can always come back and change your mind on anything. So for example, I'm looking in my personal display options about, do I want to see the grades, colors, and symbols and all that. The org unit display, which the org unit is D2L speak for class, right? So what are the students going to see? Again, all of those same options here. And then under calculation options, you have those same choices you made before. If we go back to, I believe it's personal display options, we have the choice here to repeat the final grade at the start of the user list. So I'm going to turn that one on. You can also set which grades area you want to go to by default when you click grades up here in the navigation bar. Do you want to go to enter grades or do you want to go to manage grades? Right now I have it set to manage grades, but I could change it to automatically take me to enter grades if that's where I'm going to be going more often. We'll click save, and we'll go back to enter grades, and you can see that the student's total score, their final calculated grade, now shows up right here in the front of the gradebook, so I don't have to scroll all the way to the end to see that. Okay, I told you I'd show you how to link the grade items so that you don't have to manually enter the grades. So we have these assignments, and I want to link each of these to the Dropbox assignments I had before. And you'll notice there's a column here called Association. This is used to indicate that a grade item you've created, such as Homework 1, is associated with another item in D2L, such as a Dropbox assignment. The way those are created is by actually going to the assignment or discussion or quiz itself and then associating it with a grade item. So in this case, I'll go to Dropbox, and you'll see I have my 7 Dropboxes set up here. These are the Dropbox folder. I want to actually edit the week 1 folder in this case. And in this Dropbox folder, besides the name and some other information, I can actually associate it with a grade item. So when I click on this drop-down menu, it gives me a list of all the available grade items. In this case, I'm going to associate it with Homework 1. We'll click Save. Oh, and it looks like I forgot to associate a score with that. This score should match what you have in your grade item. So it was out of 5 points for the homework. We'll click Save. And now if I go back to grades, waiting for it to go back to grades, you'll see that now Homework 1 is associated with a Dropbox. So I would want to go back and do the same thing for Homework 2. So I'm gone back to the Dropbox again. I'm in the Homework 2 folder, and I'm going to associate this with, and notice Homework 1 is no longer available, right? Because we already matched Homework 1 to the homework grade item. So this list will shrink as you use up available grade items. So I'm associating this with Homework 2. Oops, I have to put the 5 points in there as well. I could go back to my Dropbox folder list and associate week 3. I'm going to associate that with Homework 3. 5 points. Go back to my folder list. You'll notice every time I associate a Dropbox folder, I also get this little ruler icon that's showing that it's tied to a particular grade item. So that later, when I come back and I grade this Dropbox assignment, that grade is automatically going to show up in my gradebook. I don't have to go back to the gradebook and manually enter those grades. So that would be the process for associating Dropbox assignments. Quizzes work a little bit differently. So let me go back to grades just 1 second to show you. I've associated the first 3 Dropbox items here. That's good. I have 8 quizzes. So to associate a quiz, what I would need to do is actually have a quiz, go to quizzes, and then go into edit those particular quizzes, which you see here. So for example, for week 1, I'll click on the week 1 quiz. And on the properties screen, again, I have an entry for a grade item. So here I'm going to associate it with the week 1 quiz. And then in quizzes, you want to be sure to check the box. If you're going to have it automatically graded, you want it to automatically export that to the gradebook as well. So down here, it's automatically grading the quiz, and here it's automatically sending it to the gradebook. In my mind, it doesn't do a lot of good to grade it, but not show that grade anywhere. We'll click Save. And we get the little indication down here that it's been saved. I'll go back to the quiz list, go to week 2. Again, look for the grade item. Notice our week 1 quiz grade item is gone because we just used it. So now we'll associate week 2 quiz with this grade item. Click Save. Oops, I forgot to export it. You come back and check that box. If you forget to do that, it's kind of a pain later on to get the grades over to the gradebook. It can be done, but it's a little tricky. So I recommend that when you're doing this, set the grade item, double check that these 2 boxes are selected. Save it, go back to the quiz list, click on the quiz you want, associate it, check the boxes, click Save. Okay, we'll do 4 of them. Let's go back to grades now and see what we've done. Now I have 4 quizzes that are already associated and 4 Dropbox assignments. The last thing we need to add here are discussions. So let me quickly add some discussions items. We'll add a new item. It'll be numeric. And this will be discussion 1. And actually, we'll add one more. Discussion 2. Okay. I'm going to go back to my grades list again. I forgot to categorize those, so I'm going to check those. Use the double pencil here. And I'm actually going to say discussion 1 and discussion 2 to give them short titles. Those are going to be worth 5 points each. And I want those to fall under discussions. Save it. I would take the time to go through and add in all 8, but we're running a little short on time here. So same goes true with discussions for associating them. So if I find my discussions, which I'm going to have to get to from the home page here. So I have several discussion forums set up here. What I would do is click the pencil icon to edit that particular discussion board. And then from the Assessment tab, this is a little different with discussions. It's not on the Properties tab, it's on Assessment. That allows me to, again, choose a grade item. So we'll say discussion 1 out of 5 points. We'll click Save. And I could go back to week 2. Notice on week 1 now I have a little grading ruler, so I could click on that, and I could go through and grade all of those discussion topics. I'm not going to do that right now. But for week 2, click the pencil to edit that discussion item. Choose the Assessment tab, and this would be the discussion for discussion 2 out of 5 points. Click Save. Now when I go back to grades, I've associated those different items with the gradebook. Those are the basics of setting up a gradebook. There's another thing we need to cover that's called final calculated grade, and you'll see it's down here at the bottom. And what that was is when we get to enter grades here, that's the total score. We talked about what that means for students. What you actually have to do in order for that to show a score, and this is kind of goofy. Let me take it back here for just a moment, is you actually have to choose to release that to your students. Otherwise, what they'll see is they'll see their grade list with no total score. And it's often best not to leave it up to the students to add up each item because they might come up with the wrong number. So the steps to do that, it's just like 4 quick steps, is to go to the Manage Grade screen, then click on the grading icon next to Final Calculated Grade. And on that grading screen, you'll see a little button at the top that says Release All, and it has a little eyeball icon next to it. You'll want to click on that Release All button. And again, these instructions will be on the Distance Ed website if you need to refer back to them. And then the 4th step is to accept the little confirmation box that comes up. It looks kind of scary. It says, are you sure you want to do this, including losing any unsaved changes on the page? This action cannot be undone. It's fine. All this does is release that total score for your students. And unfortunately, this is something that you have to do each semester when you teach. So that's why it earned the little sad face on a thing here. Every semester, it doesn't stick when you copy the course over. So that allows your students to see their grade total and not the individual items. And again, just to run through that for you, I would come back to grades, which is the Manage Grades screen here. Scroll down to the bottom, Final Calculated Grade. Click here on the grading icon. Choose Release All. Say yes. Now your students are able to see their final calculated grade.